let me be serious. But, so welcome back to 52 Lockup with 52 crimes in 52 weeks. So today, I'll keep that hand still because it's going to mess up the sound. Today we're going to be learning about the Jersey slangs with Damian Rzeszowski from 2011. Again, this is just a warning. Viewer discretion is advised for this video. I'm not into too graphic details about what happened, but nonetheless, just in case. So, Damian Rzeszowski was born in Poland in 1980. He was briefly in the army, and then he met Isabella, I'm going to butcher the name, Gertzka? I hope that was correct. They were head over heels. They found love, and then by 2004, they actually moved out to Jersey capital because there were more opportunities for him to work out there. So they set out to America, like most immigrants do. They're focusing on building up their lives, right? There he found work as a foreman's assistant, and he became known as the contractor in the neighborhood. The couple actually got married in 2005. By that time, he already had a family. He had 2 children, Kinga and Casper. He was living in a terraced house, in a quiet, leafy Victoria Crescent on the outskirts of the capital, St. Helier. Colleagues and neighbors described him as a hardworking man, a loving father. And even at some point, his father-in-law lived with him, although there are different timelines that are explained about when he moved in. But yeah, so far, everything looks great. Everything looks fine. But then at some point, something went wrong. And then in hindsight, friends stated that they were unsure of when the cracks in the Rzeszowski marriage began to first appear. So at one point, Isabella, she had made it seem like their marriage was perfect. She had even went online and she had put up a post for her husband's Polish school reunion website on August 27, 2010. Darling, I wish that all your dreams come true, and for the happiness of our little ones, you have always been such a wonderful man, husband and father. Sincerely, your loving wife. Kind of a public post, which some couples do like to do. However, a few months down the line, in 2011, she started posting different online messages that hinted that the happiness may not have been what she was trying to make it seem like. She had even posted online, I want to feel my life while I am in it. She would also make posts about, who am I? I don't know. Definitely a tough woman, because the more you suffer, the more you smile. Which inherently is actually very true. Whatever was happening in their marriage, they were both keeping it to themselves. So it does kind of question if Damian was beginning to become abusive, what was going on. And eventually, whatever was going on in their relationship led to Isabella's infidelity. Now, I'm not saying her choice was the right one or it was deserved to put him through that. However, when you're trying to put these pieces together on how the dominoes fell, that's sort of the things you would look at. So we're going from August 2010, where a loving post, to now June 2011, Isabella ends up confessing to her husband Damian that she had been having a 2-month affair with another man. She had told her husband, listen, the affair is completely over. And then she continues to post to paint a picture of their lives online. And on July 8th, she had wrote, friends are angels who lift us to our feet when our wings have trouble remembering how to fly. A minute later, she ended up adding, a man can be destroyed but not defeated. Weird. July 12th, she wrote, few men get what they desire and few deserve what they get. Okay. It turned out that the affair had ate Damian up more than anything, and on July 19, 2011, Damian took an overdose of 80 antidepressant pills. But for some reason, he was allowed to go back home after one night of observations, which personally is a surprise to me because normally a person is reviewed much longer than that. And I have personally known people who have tried to swallow a ton of pills, and the hospital had them much longer to be evaluated, whether you're looking at before 2011 protocols and after 2011. So I'm personally confused to why he wasn't evaluated longer, especially after taking these antidepressant pills. Because of what happened, his wife ended up posting to say I guess a Facebook post to save their marriage as a public attempt for Damian. And then it was quoted that after watching her husband suffer about the cheating, she had told a friend of hers, like, I understand now that I love Damian. I will never do it again. I want my family back. So there were a lot of signs in between looking at her post that they are not having a healthy relationship. And I suspect from her post that about her loving her husband had more to do with like a public demonstration opposed to what was really going on in the relationship. The truth is usually people who post up their relationship are seeking like validation, external validation from the world, if you will, of their relationship and the choices that they are making. Like, look, I have apologized, or I love them. So like if their partner cares for them, or they're seeking external validation, right, for their behavior on how their relationship is. These posts rarely ever have to do with the actual person that they have the relationship with, right? So at some point, their 47-year-old friend was named Cordian Berkolek, who apparently is an established natural healer. He had even offered the couple therapy for free because he's like, hey, we're friends. I want to help you two out, right? Because there's a lot brewing here. And instead, Damian decided that he wanted to have a one-night stand that he wanted to tell Isabella about, to rub it in her face and be like, well, here, this is how I'm going to respond. He did revenge cheating, right? So their relationship is still continuing to spiral out and spiral out and spiral out, but they still decide, you know what? We're going to make things work, right? They were going to start fresh. So Damian was beginning to succumb to a lot of the pressures that were in his mind and in his reality. And at some point he decided, he's going to try to kill himself again. So he had been suffering already from like moderate to severe depression, which could be the cause of his psychotic symptoms, right? So Damian decides, I'm going to keep this marriage together. I'm going to put like tens of thousands of dollars together, and I'm going to do a property deal in Poland. We're going to move out there. We're going to have a great home. He had this whole plan set up, right? Because he really wanted to move back home to Poland, right? He wanted to prove to his family and his wife that, they could get through their tribulations. But when he traveled back home to his hometown with his wife, they ended up discovering that the apartments, the person he made the deal with, what was supposed to be built was not built. The developer did not keep their word and was not returning any money. So this is where it starts to really tip over. So because the developer did not keep his promise, they were absolutely devastated. The truth is they actually lost their life savings in that. And because Damian put all of his eggs into one basket, he began to seek out other ways of dealing with it, right? He wasn't seeking out couples therapy. He wasn't seeking therapy for himself. And now the couple is facing financial ruin, right? That became what is known now as his major breaking point, right? Just look at it. You lose your life savings. Your wife has now just cheated on you. He started apparently drinking more, taking more medication, becoming more violent in with his family. And in response, in the midst of all this turmoil, Damian decides, you know what? We're going to take the family on a holiday. We're going to Poland. We're all going to enjoy ourselves. So the young family spent a wonderful 2 to 3 weeks in Poland. Apparently during that time, Damian decided to pay for a prostitute. I'm not sure why that part was in the news, but apparently it was there. So now here's where it gets bad. The Rzeszowskis were returning home, and a friend of Isabella was actually having marital problems of her own. Her name was Marta de la Haye. She apparently caught her husband kissing another woman in the beginning of August, and they had gotten to a fight at that party. Her husband's name is Craig. And because she was a care worker from Poland, she got into this huge fight, and what ended up happening is that she ended up getting arrested herself on suspicion of assault on her husband, who was actually from Jersey. He had like a couple of scratches on his face, and the police ended up charging her with domestic violence and released her on a conditional bail, which ended up banning her from the couple's exclusive beachfront apartment block overlooking like the area. Which forced her to seek sanctuary with her friend, which is weird because she ended up having the daughter with her, but there's also no mentions if she had any bruising. Like, it's very iffy, right, on the information. So now we have this going on. The family's now Rzeszowskis. They're returning to New Jersey, right? They're going back over to where they live. They've lived there for the last 6 years. Marta's bringing her 5-year-old daughter, Julia, to their residence, and it was supposed to be a great day. Unfortunately, on August 14th, 2011, the family that was there together was the father-in-law, Grandpa, the invited neighbor, Martha, or Isabella's friend, obviously, right? And then the 3 kids, right? At some point around 3 p.m., in about 15 minutes, Damian snaps. He grabs 2 kitchen knives. He finds his father-in-law, Marek Gardzka, who's 56 years old, while he's watching television, sneaks up behind him, starts stabbing him. I mean, he's just going in. He travels all the way down from the living room, stabs his 18-month-old son, Casper, 16 times. Then he stabs the same amount of times for Kinga and Marta's daughter, Julia, 13 times each. These are 5-year-olds. 34-year-old Marta witnesses what's happening before she's even killed and attacked herself. At some point, Isabella realizes there is chaos going on in the house. Everyone is being murdered, and there's nothing else she can do. She flees, right? She makes a run for it. She manages to narrowly escape the entire apartment. But he's pursuing her, like, quickly in the street, and this is all in front of the neighbors. They watch her get murdered. Apparently, the husband had held her down, like, with his left arm and was stabbing her with his right arm, according to witnesses, right? A neighbor ended up screaming at him, like, "What are you doing?" Right? The scream apparently startled him. He lets go of his wife. The wife runs to the neighbor, collapses in front of them, and then Damian begins to stab himself in his chest and his arms while he's screaming something apparently in Polish. He had a full psychotic breakdown, right? After stabbing himself several times, he just stops, decides, and just runs back indoors, like back into the house, like nothing happened. So now in the street, the neighbors end up like trying to stop him as much as they could while this is all going on using traffic cones. Unfortunately, Marta, the friend that had came over for sanctuary, her body was later found outside a neighbor's house, where she was crying for help. There were rumors that Isabella was pregnant with the man that she had slept with, and that's what caused the psychotic breakdown, but it was actually quickly proven later on that she was not. And this all happened so quickly. I mean, so quick, right? In references, the children were often described as like little angels by their teachers. And prior to the murders, Damian was described as a very peaceful man. They had never seen him lose his temper. So it was very hard for them to believe. He was very quiet, kept himself kind of thing. And those little factors are important for what I'm going to discuss later. So after being arrested on August 31st, Damian turned out to be, he was visited by his parents, right? His parents from Poland. And during this visit, Damian was being psychologically evaluated at the same time. What they had noted was that the fact that Damian, the defendant, was brought into the visitor's room to see his parents, and then there was he told them that, like in Polish, that there were some signs that were telling him he should not go back to Jersey, but he didn't listen to them. There were some officers outside the room, like eavesdropping and listening to the conversation, and Damian didn't say anything to them about hearing voices, and this apparently matched a discussion that he had with a gentleman named Dr. Eastman, who was an expert in appearing for the defense, that Damian was hearing voices during the journey back to Jersey. The prosecution disagreed and felt that that was becoming like a crutch for him, right? Because he's trying to get out of it. That's how they had approached it. And then after he's arrested, the following day, on September 1st, his parents go back and they visit him at the prison, but this time the officers are actually in the room, and they're listening in on what's going on. And as Damian is speaking to his parents in Polish, he's kind of like, "Good morning." And the parents were asked by the officers to ask Damian for permission for the bodies of his wife and children to actually be embalmed, and what was his wishes for their funeral. If he had anything in particular, whether he wanted the bodies to be buried or cremated. He gave them their answer, and he tells his parents he doesn't recall the day. He said he remembers Martha and her daughter came by, but he doesn't remember anything else about that day. So his conversations with his parents, by the way, is considered as voluntary information, because this is not something that's provoked by officers. This is information that he had supplied. Now, because of the information that was supplied voluntarily, Sir Michael Bert's observations said that because of what he stated, it's evident that he actually recalled what happened that day. Because the whole case was actually riding on his depression, and forensic psychologist Dr. Philip Joseph has stated even in court that it was crystal clear that Damian Rzeszowski was not suffering from severe depression when he had killed the 6 people. Dr. Joseph said that this included the day before the killing during Rzeszowski's return from a holiday in Poland. So that was like one of the key factors why they were like hovering around. His psychological evaluation included the focus on how Damian's family history could have had an effect, but there was no family history of mental illness. But there was possible a violent history with his father's domestic violence and alcoholism. He had an uncle who had a criminal record as well. And his evaluation for his entire court case was trying to determine if the murder was really first degree, meaning this was premeditated, or if this was manslaughter, whether it's voluntary manslaughter, which, by the way, is when there is an intent to kill, but it's like a rile up emotions. It's only in the moment. Involuntary manslaughter is the result of an unplanned death. Towards the end of the case, what ended up happening is Damian originally was convicted of 6 counts of manslaughter in 2012, but later was cleared of murder on the grounds of diminished responsibility following the trial that he suffered from severe depression and psychotic symptoms. Although during his trial, Damian, he kept to who he was. He had a white t-shirt, which apparently, and jeans was worth mentioning in the papers I was reading. Rzeszowski showed no emotion in front of the presiding judge, and it's possible that Damian may have been in a state of shock, but it was referenced that Damian was too numbed or perhaps too medicated to feel emotion, but there's a little bit back and forth, right, trying to figure out exactly what was happening, right? So Sir Michael Burt had actually read out the verdicts that 2 jurats, which is similar to the magistrates in the UK, they had reached their verdicts, like they were done, and throughout the trial, the defendant had spent the entire time just staring down like at the floor, wouldn't like look up at like any given moment. He was just disconnected from reality, but he also wasn't showing any remorse. Damian was actually given a 30-year sentence. He was serving his 30-year sentence, and then randomly on March 31st of 2018, he was just found dead at the HMP Full Sutton in Yorkshire. They had put him in prison across seas, and it probably has more to do with his citizenship more than anything else. There were expectations of this just because he had already tried to commit suicide 5 times already, so they weren't too surprised to find his body, but there were some people who were like, why wasn't he under watch? I did have a lot of trouble looking into Damian's past, and perhaps it's because he's not from America and the news or records are difficult to obtain or see. However, to dissect the case, I was wondering if it is possible that perhaps Damian was always schizophrenic or schizoaffective, right? So now let's look at the pieces. The marriage held on to some very secretive unhappiness. If we really like start to dissect it, right? So we gotta look at what influenced Isabella's decision to cheat, or why the cheating became such a huge strain to cause him to not only try to kill himself, but end up having a severe psychotic break, especially after the financial loss. Schizophrenia is a thought disorder, it's a thinking disorder, right? It is considered to be a psychosis. It is a chronic brain disorder that affects generally less than 1% of the U.S. population, but when schizophrenia is active, the symptoms can include delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, trouble with thinking, and lacking in motivation. Now, when schizophrenia shows up, it shows up like in stages. The first stage is often referred to as a prodromal phase, where friends and family might think, a little strange, he's being a little weird, but they won't think too much of it, right? The person may prefer to spend all their time excessively alone, and they may be obsessed with like talking about like certain topics, whether it's religion, it's government, or maybe a particular public figure. It's like they're hooked into it, right? This phase can last for a few weeks, 2 years. So every person with it is relatively extremely different. And some people with schizophrenia actually don't go past that first phase. However, most tend to go past that stage. The next stage is referred to as the recovery phase, right? Which in many ways is referred to as like, it mirrors the first stage, but the symptoms are far much more intense. Like the hallucinations and the delusions start to become much more intense. They become more withdrawn to themselves. They're having really major trouble, like concentrating and keeping their thoughts like straight. And then on top of it, an extreme struggle with depression. The further, the longer that stage is active and that person is in it, the more important it actually really becomes to find treatment for that individual. When you look at Damon, I mean, he stood there in that court without any emotion after killing his own children that he loved dearly. I mean, the referencing of him stating he was hearing things is plausible and would feed into the possibility that he was actually schizophrenic, and it was just building, right? If he was schizoaffective, then that is a little bit different. So schizoaffective disorder is actually a combination of having symptoms of schizophrenia and a mood disorder. So thinking and mood disorder, right? Mood disorders are like depression, bipolar, that kind of thing. So picture that into a sandwich, danger sandwich, right? This can include symptoms that can happen at different times or at the exact same time. Often the cycles of severe symptoms are followed by periods of improvement, right? So things seem good. So like 1 minute they're like delusional, there's hallucinations, they're having depressed periods, manic periods of like high energy, and then it'll just change, right? And that may explain why things seem so great while he was in Poland, right? Because that was his period of improvement. Now, the infidelity would feed and validate any delusion or hallucination he was having, right? So psychology studies explain that like a cheater might suffer from extremely low self-esteem and a narcissistic view of things, right? Some people have a tendency for attention seeking, right? That once they are satisfied with one person, they might go on to another to fulfill their needs and to validate themselves. So was Isabella a low self-esteem narcissist, or was she falling into the category of reactive abuse, right? That was unknown to everyone else. And not all abuse includes physical. This can include emotional or verbal abuse. Either way, the two as a combination are incredibly deadly, right? And although no one deserves to die the way that, that family and those 6 people died, regardless of whether they cheated or not, that's a horrible way to go. I mean, the kids, the neighbors, the grandfather got caught in a fire that was just brewing and it was just waiting to explode. I mean, when you think about how they died, they had exsanguating hemorrhage, which would have taken them about 1 to 3 minutes to actually die, especially for that kind of hemorrhaging. That means that the arteries have been hit from like a penetrating trauma wound, whether it is a bullet or a kitchen knife, like in this case, because of how fast the crime happened. Like he hit arteries. There was no missing it, right? Now, the thing is, it is possible that people can survive a stabbing wound. It all depends on where the knife hits, but Damian made sure he hit all the important areas, right? And the fact that Damian went out of his way beyond what was necessary shows the psychotic break and passion in the kill itself. And then he ends it with stabbing himself at the end of the ordeal. I mean, that's a lot. And then when you look at over what happened, as well as including the neighbor, Martha de la Haye, her husband Craig, I mean, he had a memorial service for his wife and daughter on August 18th of 2011, right? You got to think hard about that. The last thing that happened between him and his wife was they got into a fight because he was kissing another woman at a party. They get into the little battle, and that's got to be devastating, right? To know that that's the last thing that you guys had even talked or discussed. Otherwise, without that fight, she probably would have been home, right? He lost his wife and his daughter in one afternoon. I couldn't find much on him to tie the loose ends for it. But I did find a letter that he did read at the memorial service, if you don't remember reading it. He said, "I have been trying to find the right words to say, but as much as I try, I can't. It's been a year now since those wonderful people were taken away from us by the hand of someone they trusted. My life and the lives of many families have been devastated since then. Every day is a struggle to continue, and yet it still feels like yesterday that it happened. My beautiful wife, Marta, and wonderful daughter, Julia, friends Kinga and Casper, Isabella and Marek, you will never be forgotten. Not a day goes past when I don't think about my family. I hope that one day I will see you again. Until then, I love you. I would like to also take this opportunity to thank my family and close friends for the support they have given me over the past year. Also to people who attended on the scene, who I know did their best to help in an impossible situation. The state's police and the prosecution team for doing a great job in trying to bring justice. And finally to Officer Karen Sykes for being there all the way through this, helping us to understand the whole process, and for her dedication to the job. That's what he read a year later for their memorial. I mean, that's heartbreaking. I mean, and my heart goes out to those that were left behind in the tragedy, right? And it's really, 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 really sad, right? Because in my opinion, I do think that Damian was schizophrenic or schizoaffective. I don't have all the full details that I couldn't find like online and stuff like that through the articles. They didn't really discuss his psychological evaluations as much as I would have liked to. But I definitely want to get like feedback from everyone. I want you to tell me your opinion about this case. Do you remember this case in the news? And most importantly, I do want to talk about the fact that if you know someone, including yourself, that could be suffering from schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder, do not be shy about getting help. Like, please don't be shy about it. And if you or you know someone that is in an abusive relationship, please reach out to the number that's on the screen, which is 1-800-799-7233 for help. I mean, this is like a really, really sad case. And when you're trying to put together all the pieces, you're just like, it kind of comes up as a boom, like it comes out of nowhere, like that kind of thing, instead of it truly seeing, I guess, the steps prior between the wife cheating, her weird posts that she was putting online. And I think it highlights the happy post that she said earlier, only because it makes you wonder, were things actually that good? Or was he already showing signs of schizophrenia and he never got the help that he actually really needed? And I'm not validating or excusing his behavior or anything like that, but let's say if he's like schizoaffective, right? Which is what I think that he may lean a little bit more towards, especially with the period gaps that seem to follow his life, which means that would explain why most people just thought he was normal. Maybe he was just quiet, he's to himself, da-da-da-da. Whatever was happening in her life, more than likely only her very closest of friends would have known about it. And he never got the help that he needed. And it's very heartbreaking, especially because when you look at a lot of the photos with him and his kids, you can see he loves his kids. You see there's so much affection there. And then there's another photo where you look at him where he seems very disconnected from reality, and you're kind of just like, this all could have been avoided if he had just gotten the psychological help that he actually needed. And it's really sad. And then especially when you look back at Craig, right, Marta's husband. I mean, you hear people say it all the time, like, be very mindful of what you say to others, right? Choose your words carefully, otherwise you might have your words to eat back, right? And that is such an intense moment that you guys have that kind of fight. And then because of everything that happened, she's banned from the house, which puts her in her friend's house, which puts her and her kid all in the same area where they should have not been. And they just got caught in the crossfire. It's a really, really sad situation. I hope you guys are enjoying so far the 52 lockup. I'm not sure what case I'm actually going to do next week. I was trying to find a case on something with cowboys because I just got my hat. But if I can, I'll try to do one with my cowboy hat. But in the meantime, again, give me feedback. Click that button, make sure you subscribe. And give me feedback. That's very, very, very important for me. I want to know what you guys are thinking. How do you like the show? Because I'm still trying to learn how to put this together, because I am no Bailey Sarian and I am definitely no Mr. Ballin. As much as I may love their shows, and I'm nothing like the documentaries that I enjoy watching and looking at, but I do need some feedback. If there's something you think I'm missing or something I should try, please feel free to let me know. If you want me to beat up the like button like Mr. Ballin, just let me know. But yes, again, that's my crime for this week. And I will see you guys next week on the next 52 Lockup.